Okay, we're on week, 4 of our color series? Yeah, 4, and obviously it's yellow today. This, of course, was a mistake. I wasn't dressing according to the color until I inadvertently did the first Sunday, and have ever since. I've got to say that for the people on YouTube who think I dress for my sermons, my perspectives, if they see me like this, we're trying to just lift up ways that we can look at the world a different way, and using color as our theme over the course of these 7 weeks. And so this week is the Yellow Week. I want to talk to you just briefly about what the idea of yellow brings to mind and in people's thoughts. The one that didn't come to mind for me that was most obvious was the yellow brick road, which symbolizes that path toward truth, the desire to learn what is real and to uncover that on the way home. Our place home is a place of truth and light. And so that yellow brick road should have been a defining theme for today, but I missed it, which is okay, because where I went was to another place to do with yellow. But it was a hard place to get to, because most of the understandings of yellow that are out there are pretty negative. The idea that this vibrant, beautiful color that captures our attention has such negative connotations is a challenging one and seems out of place. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the background of that. Yellow stockings is one that came about in the Elizabethan age, and it's picked up by Shakespeare in one of his plays, that a gentleman who has on yellow stockings would be seen to be jealous. So they would articulate that somebody was going to be wearing yellow stockings if they saw something going on that they knew was going to cuckold someone or make them jealous of something going on in their lives. Of course, we don't walk around talking about men in yellow stockings anymore, unless we're talking about Big Bird, and no one really knows whether that's a girl or a guy, right? So the yellow stockings has fallen out of use, and many of the connotations in the use of yellow have fallen out of use as well. Yellow has been used in that context for jealousy, and in other contexts it's been used for great treachery. And many of you will recall our understanding and being taught or knowing that during Nazi Germany's reign of horror, the yellow Star of David had to be worn by all the Jews so that they could be easily identified. And so the yellow Star of David has come to mean something treacherous and horrible. And so that legacy of negative realities associated with that color was made even more profound during that time. The yellow cheek. Anyone know what I mean by a yellow cheek? It's got to do with age. That yellow teeth thing, too, has to do with age. What's that jingle? You'll wonder where the yellow goes. Went, that's right. Pepsodent, perfect. One of the best known jingles of all time, and attesting to a negative connotation around yellow. Our yellowed teeth are something that we do not want, and so we try to keep them as white as possible, and Pepsodent was on the breaking wave of that trend. Yellow streak. Someone with a yellow streak is often used as a sign of cowardice. The word yellow has negative connotations that go back to a variety of different things. There's no real understanding where that came from. Some think that the yellow-bellied animals that slid around the land in certain areas of England, and which meant that those people who were from those areas were referred to as yellow-bellied. It's spread itself around the world in many different derogatory terms. Some think that yellow streak had to do with the reality that those who were cowards often lost control of their bladders and so left a yellow streak down their pants. But the whole idea of being a coward is associated with that color yellow, not a very pleasant use of that word. One of the things that is often associated with is yellow fever, the building of the Panama Canal, an incredible loss of life associated with yellow fever. The vaccination against which was created partly out of the desire that people would go to Panama Canal as tourists and not be able to risk getting yellow fever and dying. Ships would fly yellow flags with information about whether they had disease on board or not. A plain yellow flag meant that it was clear. A yellow flag with a black dot in it meant that there was disease on the ship, and one with very black and yellow checkers meant that there was the possibility of disease. So if you were on the high seas and you approached a ship, you would know whether or not you should go near it based on what color of yellow flag and what the nature of it was. And then there's the whole thing about yellow journalism. Yellow journalism is that sensational idea of journalism that came to the fore back in the 1890s. Back then, Joseph Pulitzer bought the New York's The World. Pulitzer had become well known in media mogul back in California, and he moved to New York and bought this newspaper with a circulation of about 15,000 and grew it to 230,000 using techniques that drew the attention of more and more people in New York. Sensational stories, undercovering scandals, political and private, and then plastering them with great big headlines on the front page. He was so effective in this work that, of course, he drew the attention of William Randolph Hearst, who also had a newspaper back in Los Angeles. He had followed Pulitzer's sort of process and recipe for success back in LA, but he decided he wanted a piece of the New York market as well. So he went to New York and he bought the New York Morning Journal and started a newspaper in competition with Pulitzer's. Now, Hearst and Pulitzer were then both putting out these sensational papers and competing with one another with the stories that they could put on their front page, stretching, if not actually recreating, what they were putting forward as truth. Pulitzer had a quiver in his, or an arrow in his quiver that was a cartoon. He started putting cartoons out, and there was one called The Great Dogs of McGugan's Lane. And it featured a dog, but became known as the Yellow Kid, because there was a kid in the cartoon that was always in this bright yellow nightshirt. Now, the creator of this cartoon was bought by Hearst, went to work for Hearst's newspaper because he was giving him more money. So, of course, Pulitzer upped the ante and bought him back. So, because Hearst didn't want to be without the cartoon, he bought another comic who could actually create a Yellow Kid cartoon of his own. So each of them for some time ran the same cartoon being put out by two different characters. But the sensational nature of the stories that they told became problematic and actually led to the Spanish-American War in many ways. It's attributed, the start of it is attributed to these two newspapers and the sensational stories they told. When the Maine, an American warship parked in Havana there at the request of the American consul, blew up mysteriously and sank, taking 260 Americans with it, the newspapers went crazy, coming up with all kinds of reasons why that happened and who did it, and lambasting Spain for their leadership in Cuba and blaming them for the sinking of the warship. And so, although neither the Americans nor the Spanish wanted to go to war, the populace, the sentiment of the people that was so stirred up by these two newspapers put the two on the brink of war, and they then entered into it. So the sensationalist drama of the competition within these newspapers caused this horrible period in American history. It does make one wonder about the sensational news that we see sometimes here in Canada, but often on the airwaves in the United States, where the necessity of truth is not as strong as it is here in Canada, our laws actually protecting it, their laws having been dismissed, so that the stories can get bigger and better and more eye-catching as they are told on network television. It makes you wonder where the next, maybe they have recently already taken the steps of entering into conflict, into situations of chaos led by this popular sentiment spurred on by news media. But I want to reclaim the color yellow. At the board, we sometimes take the ideas of Edward de Bono and lateral thinking and use them to find our way through issues or projects that we are putting on the table that we want to discuss. And we've most recently done it in some work that the board and members of the board and other people participating in the congregation are doing around what is it that West Hill can do and be in the future that would be really creative, that speaks to who we are, and that gets something positive going forward for us, that we would be recognized for. In order to really think our way through some of the issues, we placed the de Bono different colored hats, that concept on the table, and started working our way through it. What are the most creative things? What are your feelings about this? What's holding you back? The yellow hat is about optimism and about positive things, about looking for the benefits inherent in an idea. And in truth, yellow is the color that most captures our attention. You'll see fire trucks are sometimes yellow. They stick out way more than red ones. Fire hydrants, the line on the road, caution signs, all bright yellow because they're going to catch your eye. So I think that rather than being something negative, we should perhaps think of yellow as something positive. And so I want to reclaim it, and I want to think not of yellow stockings or yellow jackets or yellow cheek or yellow streak, but the yellow dress as a symbol of optimism. And I take it from this reading from Barbara Kingsolver from High Tide in Tucson. In my own worst seasons, I've come back from the colorless world of despair by forcing myself to look hard for a long time at a single glorious thing, a flame of red geranium outside my bedroom window, and then another, my daughter in a yellow dress, and another, the perfect outline of a full dark sphere behind the crescent moon. Until I learned to be in love with my life again. Like a stroke victim, retraining new parts of the brain to grasp lost skills, I have taught myself joy over and over again. When we consider those bright yellow lines or yellow signs or yellow objects that are to catch our attention and alert us to dangers, we might think of them not just as cautionary, but perhaps as symbols of optimism. See this, take a look at this sign, and good will come because you will avoid that horrible thing. Or good will come because this is where the water will come that will put out the fire. Or good will come because you'll catch that curve in the road. Good can come of the color yellow. And in Barbara Kingsolver's moments of despair, her daughter in a yellow dress catches her eye, and considering it, resting in its beauty, she's able to pull herself back to the point that she can love her life again. Each of you got in your yellow bulletin today a piece of candle wick. And you know what these are. Most of you know what these are. During our service in the longest night, we create bracelets for ourselves, or we take bracelets. I'm going to make you create them. We take bracelets away, and with the words, "You are the light of the world." Because each and every one of us born into this world is born with an incredible hope resting on our shoulders. That everything that we are is going to blossom and bloom. The potentiality in that child is huge. I told Ann Buller, the president of Centennial College, that I'm going to start crying again, as the candidates came up on the stage at the graduation, at one point I saw them, these men and boys who were, some of them, they have these long academic gowns on with flip-flops and tattoos all down their legs, or tattoos up their faces, and incredibly big holes in their ears with those great rings, and some of them with sunglasses on that they decided they'd take off just as they came up on the stage. And I started seeing them. I had to shake every one of their hands, and I started seeing them nestled in the arms of a parent that loved them. So started seeing them as an infant with all of that potential, all of that hope resting on them. And I was so moved, I started to tear up and had to get a grip because I couldn't be shaking hands, bawling my eyes out for these poor men and few women who were doing it. But it makes me think that we are all the light of the world, that those kids, many of them, as I said earlier, first time a generation has ever gone to post-secondary education or new to Canada at Centennial College. An incredible number of students have been in Canada only the last 7 years. And this hope that rests on their shoulder as that piece of cloth is put over it, this hope that the future might be bright and brilliant. And so I brought these pieces of candlewick today because I want you to be part of creating hope for a community, for the community that Ruth is going to visit tomorrow. A community that has asked 25 Canadians to come in and see the reality in which it lives. A community that has youth who are growing up thinking there is no future for them, that we don't want or need them, that there's nothing for them in this country. A community that sits without the support and the concern and the assurances that we need to be providing, the same assurances that we would provide our own children. And so I want you to make them bracelets so that Ruth can go up there and tell them that they are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. I want them to carry this with them every moment. And some of them are a length that's for youth and young adults, and some of them are a length that's just for children. And Ruth, I hope, will give the youth the ones that are for the kids and invite them to find a child in their community that they can give the children's bracelet to. Now, Dana has some slides here that can help you figure out how to make these, because I know you'll think it's difficult. So take your cord and place the left-hand one up alongside to the left side of the end on the right, so that you bring it up like that. Everybody got that? Okay, go to the next slide. You make up the letter P by taking your cord from the left, looping it underneath the one on the right, and then bringing it around and over both of them. You're taking the cord, going around. You took these pictures, honey. Okay, you're taking the cord from the left, underneath and behind the cord on the right, and then bringing it over in the letter P. And then tucking it up to the next one. Next slide. Tucking it up and through. Tucking it up and through and pulling it tight. Okay. How are we doing? Do we need to go back a couple of slides, or? Pardon me? No, you can't make a bowline because you can't, if you can fit it over your wrist, it's going to fall off. You need a slip knot so that it won't fall off. But I knew that you'd have difficulty with this. Okay, once you've got that done, excellent. Has everybody got it done? Okay. Pretty good. Okay, flip it over. We'll go to the next slide, which is back. Okay, flip it over, and you've got your tie again up to the left of the right side. And do the same thing. Underneath, and then make the letter P. And tie it around. So you're tying 2 knots around the center. I had cards made out to tell people that these were made by you, but they didn't print well. It was a disclaimer. Good! Betty's got it. Excellent. I knew you'd think it was hard, but I wanted you to think about what's hard while you were doing it, too, because this is nothing compared to what those kids deal with on a day-to-day basis. This is a piece of cake. They're supposed to be adjustable. Yes, they slide. Yes. Oops. I'll be available afterward for some tutoring sessions. We'll do them at coffee hour. It is important that this community come to know how important they are, not just within their community and not just to us, but to the future and the health of this planet, to the future and health of the generations to come, to the future and health of all forms of life on this earth. And so the challenge that it is to make this little bracelet multiplied exponentially is the challenge that it will be to remind and make these kids believe that they are the light of the world and that we're convinced that they are so. I'm going to leave you with it and offer you again the image of that yellow dress. I want it to work into you as a part of speech, as something that we use every day, so that you can say to someone, well, she was wearing a yellow dress. It's like she was wearing a yellow dress, or it's like I saw a yellow dress. And every time you say it, you're talking about hope, you're talking about optimism, you're talking about making the lives of someone different, better, more hope-filled, possible. The benefits, everything in that one statement. It's like she was wearing a yellow dress. It's like I saw a yellow dress. Take that little piece of Barbara Kingsolver and weave it into our everyday language, so that in 100 years, if someone does a sermon or a perspective on yellow, alongside the yellow streak and the yellow journalism and all that negative stuff will be a yellow dress to remind us of optimism and the need for hope in this broken and challenging world. Amen.